India saw visible US mediation in Balakot and Pahalgam. Where does India-US relationship go from here? The second question is, US has low threshold for terrorism and terrorists. Why doesn't it allow for its friends? The third issue is, why did the United States veto the IMF loan to Pakistan? Fourth question is, does US need Pakistan against Iran? The fifth issue is, India's battlefield has been redefined. How can India sharpen its AI drone game? Sixth, should India continue to keep Indus Water Treaty suspended? On this, I'm joined by Lieutenant General Arun Sahni, former General Officer Commanding in Chief, Indian Army. Thank you so much, sir, for joining me. Pramit Pal Chaudhary, Foreign Affairs Analyst, Journalist. Thank you, Pramit, for joining me. Brigadier Anil Gupta and Ambassador Jayant Das Gupta, former Ambassador to WTO. Thank you, sir, all of you. Let me straight away go to Pramit first. Pramit, the sort of intervention which we witnessed the second time, first Balakot and now, and both in the forms of tweet. Your comments.
So in Balakot, the real, I don't think the Americans had very much role to play at all.
Trump tweeted from Singapore, if you recall, when he was in a meeting with the Kim.
Yeah, but I don't think that was the core. The real game was that you may remember Pakistan had struck back after it carried out the attack, but it was fundamentally a symbolic attack. 6 missiles dropped on effectively barren land. Pakistan, and then Prime Minister Modi was the one who decided that he would not escalate, he would not respond. And you may remember he made a speech that afternoon at a temple where he indicated that as far as he was concerned, India had done all it needed to do. Trump tweeted, but not too different from here in this case. His role was actually irrelevant. In other words, even if he hadn't tweeted, it would have made no difference, because once India decided to close that chapter, Pakistan was not interested or did not have the capacity to take it forward. In this case, it seems slightly more difficult. Pakistan was clearly, in my view, was trying to strike a blow against India in the sense of carrying out an attack that included probably a high body count or some key military assets. For it to be able to claim that they had revenged, quote, the original Indian attack on Muridke, Bhawalpur, and other terrorist sites. That was simply not happening. India's air defenses proved a little too difficult, and in fact, it was Pakistan's air defenses that collapsed. Once the Indian attack, the missile attacks began to hit their air bases, and particularly began to hit close to the heart of their nuclear command centers and storage areas, they were basically looking for an off-ramp. They were looking for a face-saving, and they were not going to get that from India, not after Pahalgam. So that's where they basically raised the nuclear flag. This is more like, not so much as Balakot, I would argue, but more like 2002, where you may remember we mobilized after the attack on the Indian Parliament, after about 6 or 7 months of a military stalemate. Pakistan began to mate its nuclear warheads to its missiles, triggering the Western governments to call upon their citizens to leave India and putting some degree of economic pressure on India, which led to a quasi-negotiated solution. This is somewhat similar, I think, I would argue, closer to 2002. And in this case, Rubio seems to have done the bulk of the negotiations. Vance seems to have at least chivied the White House to get involved. Trump did absolutely nothing, as far as anybody can tell, except try to get some credit for it. I think the American intervention, while I can understand why they did it from their point of view, and I think we should not discount the role of Saudi Arabia in this, it was probably a little too early. As far as India's interests were concerned, I think it would have been good to have a couple more days, given India's military or aerial dominance at that point. But anyway, it's happened. And once you enter a certain nuclear threshold, it becomes inevitable that both the international community and your own strategic options eventually start to narrow to finding a way to get out of this.
Are you saying that the nuclear boogie came into play again? NYT has done a very detailed article on the same line from it today.
Yes, I think that was a crucial part in getting the Americans to intervene. You may remember the Vice President J.D. Vance had said America has no interest in this war. And that fits in with the roughly the isolationist policies of the Trump administration. But then you find that he leads, he and Rubio do come in. Why do they get in? Because the nuclear element comes in. Pakistan raises that bogey. And so they decide that they have to intervene at this point. Um, this continues to be a standard ploy by Pakistan. As I said, 2002, in my view, was the last time they really used this effectively. But it's also an indication of the desperation Pakistan found itself in this conflict. Their own calculations had basically gone awry, and I think the destruction of their air defense system, or collapse of it, and rapid degradation was something that caught them by surprise.
General Sani, a lot of people are saying that uh, shouldn't the army been given a point also, Pramit mentioned, little more time, 72 hours, 92 hours, 100 hours?
I think let me just put it by I heard one of the statements made by one of the foreign secretaries retired. I think he mentioned something that India wanted to avoid war and Pakistan could not afford a war. I think if I go by that premise, uh, what is enough is the question that really comes out. I think we have achieved two, three things which are very, very profound, which I think is what was stated by the Prime Minister and by the Defense Minister when they started the whole conflict. They said we need to give and hit the place which conceptualized and conducted and controlled this kind of an operation. That is what was implied in the words that they used. And that is what we have done.